Hi, I'm Benjamin Payne. At the K-12 Education Office at Hillsdale College, we support school founding groups and their efforts to start classical schools across the country. Finding the right leader is one of the first and most important steps to building a successful school. While we do consider experience in education, we seek candidates who exhibit unwavering personal integrity, honesty, courage, and servant-hearted leadership. Perhaps that's you. If you're looking to engage in fulfilling, impactful, and challenging work protecting our nation's future and building up the next generation of virtuous citizens, we'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for strong school leaders right now. Learn more about how you can make a difference at hillsdale.edu/leader. hillsdale.edu/LEADER. That's hillsdale.edu/leader.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. We're joined today by Amber Nolan. She's a third grade teacher at Hillsdale Academy here in Hillsdale, Michigan, and we're going to chat about her first year teaching classically. Amber, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Before we jump in, tell us a little bit more about what you do at Hillsdale Academy and perhaps something about the school itself.
Yeah, so Hillsdale Academy is located in Hillsdale, Michigan, and we have one class per grade. So I am the third grade teacher at the academy. So it's kind of a unique and cool opportunity to teach the only third grade class at Hillsdale Academy.
This is just after your first year teaching classically in that third grade classroom. What was your preparation for this? How did you prepare? What was your background entering that third grade classical classroom for the first time?
Yeah, so I graduated from Hillsdale College in May of last year. So during my college experience, I was taking a couple part-time semesters and working at another school in town, just as an aide, kind of helping where the teacher needed me. And then during kind of my last semester at Hillsdale College, I was applying for schools in town and was offered the job at Hillsdale Academy. So I accepted. And the preparation, I just, had the summer, went to this K-12 conference here in Hillsdale, and then kind of leading up into the beginning of the school year, I really prioritized the curriculum and classroom management. Curriculum in the lower school, the primary rocks of the lower school include literacy essentials and Singapore math. And I knew going in that I wasn't going to master or perfect all of the curriculum and being a teacher. So I prioritized those two and spent a lot of time learning about the curriculum and then learning how to teach it. That required quite a bit of time in the summer. And then on top of that, I also spent a lot of time in my classroom just becoming familiar with the space and organizing things. And then lastly, I spent quite a bit of time working on my procedures. I came up with a document, wrote down all of the different procedural things that I wanted to address with the kids when they arrived at school. And then we drilled that hard when they entered the classroom.
We'll get into details along the way, but how did it go? How was your first year? What did you think?
Yeah, it was overwhelming at first and fast-paced. That's how I would describe it. It feels like you're learning all of these new things, trying to understand how to balance parent communication and managing the classroom and learning about the curriculum. So at times it definitely felt overwhelming, but I also enjoyed the fast-paced nature of teaching and the job. So yeah, I think that it can be easy to compare yourself to other teachers, especially the first year, simply because there are, teachers across the hall doing beautiful work, and they've been doing this for so long. But I tried to just maintain the mindset of I will learn from these teachers and use it in my own classroom, not in a humble way, not in a way that is I guess I didn't approach it as these teachers are intimidating and I have something that, something that I need to compare myself to them. Is more just a learning experience.
How would you say your experience as an aide that year before compared to your experience at the front of the classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think being an aide allowed me to experience a different classroom. So this was in a public charter kind of, it was a public school setting. So it was definitely different from the classical situation we have at the academy. So that was an interesting difference. And then also just being in the kind of to the side, being able to watch a teacher try to manage a classroom and execute the curriculum, it gave me a lot of practical tips as to what to expect when I entered the classroom, my own classroom.
I want to go to your very first day. Introducing yourself to your students for the first time.
Yeah.
How do you do that? What's the impression that you want to leave them with after that first day for them in third grade and your first day as a teacher?
Yeah. So when I first introduced myself, I actually, we had met at a parent orientation briefly, but this was my opportunity to express what our classroom was going to be like without any parents being there. And so I actually just lined those kids up outside. I didn't even let them enter the classroom before I introduced myself, and I kind of laid some ground rules before they entered and what I expected of them. And then we did the same thing every day after that. I had the same expectations for them. They lined up outside. They never entered before I did. And then I greeted them at the door. So I taught them how to look me in the eye. We would handshake, and I would say, "Good morning, student," and I would greet them every morning. So then they entered and they sat down, and the lights stay dim until class begins, and then the lights come on, and then we start with, "Today we will learn the good, the true, and the beautiful." And they repeat that after me. And that's how we started day one, and that's how we finished our school year out. I wanted to set the precedent that this is my classroom. You will be expected to follow my rules, and that I will be leading you. You are following. That's your role. But I also wanted them to know that it's a personal experience as well, that I'm going to meet them where they're at.
First year, so much to tackle, curriculum and classroom management. At a new school, you're teaching for the first time, but you're also at a school for a first time and learning those rhythms. How did you approach your responsibilities, and how did you prioritize what had to be done on a daily and weekly basis?
Yeah, so I think what I didn't expect is all of the random things that come up through the day, whether that's parent emails or meetings that you need to have with faculty, or students getting hurt or students needing to go home, these kinds of things. But in the beginning, as I said earlier, I wanted to prioritize those main core rocks of the curriculum. So that required time outside of the classroom for sure. But I wanted to make sure that I separated that personal and work life balance a little bit. I think oftentimes I hear first year teachers saying, "Oh, I had to take all this work home. I had to grade all of this work, and I don't even know where to begin." And so I wanted to be really strict with myself, to avoid burnout and to avoid frustration. I'm going to spend this amount of time towards preparing for the curriculum and for what the day holds. So what that ended up being for me is I would go into the school about 1 to 2 hours prior to the school day. Now, it's tempting to sleep in and just show up, at 7:45 when I was expected to.
I guess if you call that sleeping in.
Yeah,
right?
yes, exactly. So I would show up about an hour to 2 hours early and get my work done then. There are no interruptions. I'm fresh. I'm ready to go. I did try prepping in the afternoon for the next day or the next week, and that just turns into interruptions by students that are still in the building and faculty meetings, practices, things that are also good and a little bit more social, but they kind of cut into that prep time. And if that were the case, then I would have to end up doing it at home in the evening. So anyways, I would recommend 1 to 2 hours a day, especially early on within the first semester. And then kind of in the morning, doing it in the morning is really helpful. So I would also say that I spent about an hour, 1 to 2 hours on the weekend as well to kind of get a broad plan for what the week held.
Your learning doesn't stop, despite the fact you've graduated from college. You're learning new things about the profession and how to be in the classroom. What are some of those pedagogical practices that you learned during your first year?
Oh, yes. So a couple of pedagogical practices that I found really helpful. Firstly, I used imperatives rather than using interrogative statements. For example, will you please put your pencil down? I simply said, put your pencil down. The change in that phrase or that statement really helps the students recognize this isn't a request that you get to choose. It is something that I expect you to do and that you don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting how they notice the difference. And there were a few times where I would use an interrogative statement or ask them a question. Oh, will you please push your chair in rather than push your chair in? And they take it as, well, this is an opportunity for me to exercise my choices. So yes, the using interrogative or imperative statements. I would also say using the library, the K-12 library, was incredibly helpful. Mm-hmm. I'll as an example, the Literacy Essentials Q&A flow. I wanted to see it in action, and so there's a teacher out there a third grade teacher on the library who does the Q&A flow. And I watched her do that probably 5 times. And throughout the year, I watched it just to try to get it down. That's one example. I use the library, the K-12 library, so many times. And then just generally putting the onus of thinking on students is incredibly helpful. What I mean by that is, yes, we have this knowledge that we're presenting to them, but we want them to discover that knowledge on their own. And so asking questions is the best way to do that, as it pertains to what we're learning. Mm-hmm. How does it make sense that a fraction with a smaller denominator is actually a larger fraction, or whatever that is? Asking those questions helps them reach that end themselves.
Talking with Amber Nolan, who's a third grade teacher at Hillsdale Academy, about her first year teaching classically, which just recently wrapped up. Was there a time during this school year when you were confused or uncertain, might be a better word to use? Where did you go for help? Who did you talk to?
Yeah. So luckily I have a great administration. They're both Mike Roberts and Julie Apel are incredibly helpful and supportive. As a first-year teacher, it was so nice to be able to have them in my corner, as well as the lower school head and then and friends and family that are also teachers. So it was really nice. Julie Apel and I met once a week for 30 minutes, and that provided a great opportunity to share some of the joys and the great things that happened in my classroom, but also just to air some grievances in a safe space. Mm-hmm. But she also provided practical help as well. And so I would recommend, I'm sure there are things set up for new school or new teachers, but it was really helpful for me to have a safe place where I could express grievances about students or other situations that were really difficult in the classroom, and then find practical ways to solve those problems.
You're interacting and teaching young scholars and students on a daily basis, but you're also interacting with parents too. Mm-hmm. What are the types of questions that parents ask you? What do they want to know? And was there anything that they were asking that you didn't expect to be answering?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Generally, they're, especially in the beginning, at the academy for third grade, they begin receiving grades. And so when those first grades hit the grade book, they're it's a bit of a shock. Prior to this, they haven't been receiving grades. And so they were asking a lot of questions about why I give certain grades and how it works. And it was an opportunity for me to learn as well, because I had never put grades in a grade book. And so I learned little things like, instead of just putting one thing in at the beginning, you should kind of wait and then put a lot of things in at one time. So that way it balances things out. Parents don't freak out about that. It can be overwhelming to see that at first. So they ask, yes, questions about grades. Questions about curriculum come up frequently. Again, it's a little intimidating because I'm learning about the philosophy of the curriculum. I'm in the process of that, and I don't exactly see where the vision is going quite yet. So that's when asking questions of other teachers in the school or my administrators to help out, it was really helpful. And then honestly, I wasn't expecting the little parent emails throughout the day. So-and-so needs to get picked up at this time, or so-and-so has a birthday coming up. And I learned to check my email for parent emails at certain times in the day, knowing that they're coming in all the time, but just regularly checking. If I were to check them all day long, then I wouldn't actually get any teaching done.
What do you think that you learned about your students over the course of a year?
Yeah. I think that I learned that, first of all, they're filled with wonder. If presented in a way that allows them to wonder at something, that they're filled with that wonder, and you can use that. I quickly learned that simply presenting information, it killed the love of learning. And so engaging them in a way that engaged their minds and their hearts, and they would participate well. They wanted to learn and they wanted to be there. I also think I learned that at the end of the day, they're still kids, and the expectations that I set at the beginning of the year, they needed to be reminded frequently. So I often found that at the end of the day, if I was frustrated with something, it's because I failed to explain my expectations for them. Something as simple as raising their hand in class. You'd think we do this every day. They should get the hang of this, but they need to be reminded. And I would preface at the beginning of the day and at the beginning once they returned from lunch, I would say, I will remind you, you are now in class. I expect you to raise your hand, and this isn't a time to talk to friends. This time isn't about you. We're working together as a team, and I expect you to execute your role on this team. And that means raising your hand. This isn't a free-for-all.
Anything that you think that you will do differently in year 2? What might you change, adjust, whether it be classroom approach, preparation approach? What do you think you might do differently in year 2? Yeah,
I've been in my classroom a bit, prepping and making these changes that you ask about. More practical changes as they apply to the curriculum. So for example, for Singapore, we use a lot of manipulatives. And so I'm going to arrange it and organize my little manipulatives closet so that way it's really easily accessible. Those are some practical changes that make it a little easier on me throughout the day. And then just generally, I think approaching the day a little differently as well. I think my first year teaching, I just wanted to come out strong, and I've wanted to do it perfectly. And over the course of the year, I realized that it takes a long time to become a master teacher, and it's okay if there are certain subjects that I'm not as strong in, as long as I just pursue excellence in one small thing each day. That'll be my goal.
All right. Finally, recommendations for new teachers. Now that you've been through a full year of teaching third grade, what would you want to know that perhaps no one told you before you started your first year at third grade? Yeah, I think emphasizing balance of work and personal life. I heard so many new teachers that said that they were taking work home, as I mentioned earlier. And I would say that some practical ways to avoid that, avoid the blending of it'll happen. It's unavoidable as a teacher, but to minimize that, I would recommend finding a mentor, and then prioritizing and optimizing that time at work as well. During those planning periods, make the most of what you have, and really try to come up with a rhythm that allows you to prep for the next day or the next week. And then I would also recommend finding a moment of silence in the day as well, whether it's 5 minutes or just heading out for a little walk or something. The day can feel really overwhelming, especially since the kids are with you almost all day long. And so stopping and maybe taking a 5 to 10 minute break to go out and maybe be outside, or spending just a little bit of alone time gives you a little bit of peace, so that way you can get through the day. Amber Nolan is third grade teacher at Hillsdale Academy, entering year 2, as we talked about her first year teaching classically. Amber, thank you so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thank you.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K12. Hillsdale_K12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.